What's going on, guys? It's Zach here. Bring you guys another fantasy football video. Want to wish you guys all a happy Thanksgiving and everything. We're recording this on Friday night, so we're already past that, and you guys will be getting to start sits over all the games that happened after Thursday and Friday. So we got, I think, 12 games left in the week, but hopefully you guys all had a good time with family, had a good meal, and had some good time to be thankful for everything. So I'm thankful for all of you guys as well, and truly appreciate everything so far this season. It's been a lot of fun. But yeah, before I get too sappy, got a lot of games left here. Going to be a lot of matchups that I think are really important. And obviously, now we've got a lot of information heading into our week 12 matchups because a lot of us had a lot of things that really changed the outlook on a lot of our matchups in week 12 just with how many games have already happened. So maybe you're in a situation where you need a lot of ceiling, and that could easily impact your start set decisions. Maybe you find yourself down a lot of points already and really in a bad spot. Maybe you find yourself in a spot where, okay, you're going to win unless you blow things up on Sunday. So, really fun so far. Really going to be a fun week of football. Obviously, not the most competitive of games over the last couple, but at least it's always fun to have football, especially on a Thursday and Friday where we don't normally get that kind of football. So yeah, it should be a lot of fun. I think we've got a lot of good games this week. And before I ramble on too long, I'll just get into the first game. Starting things off with the Buccaneers at the Colts. I think this one could be a really exciting game. I actually think there are going to be a lot of points scored in this one. Vegas agrees with me. It's one of, if not the highest over under on the week so far. Both these pass defenses, especially, are very vulnerable. So I think there's going to be a lot of passing yards between both teams. For the Buccaneers, Rachaad White and Mike Evans, they're must starts. Rachaad White is the running back 7 on the season to this point. He's been a rock star, and I don't think that's going to stop this week. He's definitely going to be in my lineup for sure. And then Mike Evans has had plenty of boom games. I wouldn't be shocked at all to see Evans go for over 100 and a touchdown this week. So both White and Evans have got to be in your lineups. They're both honestly like a wide receiver 1 and a running back 1 this week, respectively. Chris Godwin, he's a flex play for me. Obviously, he hasn't had those like ceiling games that we really hope for out of a guy of his caliber, but he's still obviously going to be a guy that you can consider playing, especially in a plus matchup like this. I think you can play Chris Godwin. I just obviously wouldn't expect that sort of ceiling game because he's not really being utilized downfield the way guys like Evans are. Outside of that, for the Buccaneers, Cade Otton and Baker Mayfield, they're both solid streaming options. I think they're lower tier options. I wouldn't love to be playing either of them, but Baker probably finds his way to like 250 and 2 this week, potentially even more. And Otton, he's obviously on the field a ton. He's got a chance to score, so you could do worse than Otton if you need to. For the Colts, I think Gardner Minshew, he's a low-end streaming option. I think that especially in like super flex or 2 quarterback leagues is a solid option. In 1 super flex league I'm in, Russ is normally my second quarterback, but I think I'm going to start Gardner Minshew over him in super flex this week. So that should give you some sort of context there. Obviously, Minshew's not a guy that I'd love to be starting in a 1 quarterback league. Outside of that, for the Colts, Jonathan Taylor, he's a lineup block every single week going forward. He got that workhorse roll back. He's going to be a stud. He's definitely got to be in your lineups regardless of matchup because actually it is a relatively tough matchup for JT against this Buccaneers run defense. Michael Pittman, he should be great. I expect a big performance out of him. Again, this Buccaneers pass defense has been awful so far this season. And then Josh Downs, he's a flex option. Obviously, he's a little banged up, so keep an eye on those practice reports. But it sounds like he's going to suit up. He's a good player. He's shown spurts of being really good earlier on in the season, and I think he could have a really high end game as well this week. So you can play Josh Downs if you need to, especially in PPR. Next, we got the Patriots at the Giants. Obviously, not the high-end performance or gladiator matchup this once was when they met in the Super Bowl a couple times about a decade ago. But this is going to be a really gross matchup for the Patriots. Ramondre is a must-start. I think they'll probably find the end zone a couple times on the ground this week. I bet Ramondre and Zeke probably each find their way in the end zone. So I think you can play Zeke as well as a desperation running back play. Outside of that, for the Patriots, I think Demario Douglas, he's a solid flex option, preferably in a PPR format. The thing is, we still don't know who's going to be starting the quarterback for the Patriots. It could be Mac Jones or Bailey Zappi. I wouldn't be shocked at all if we see both of them. Just not super excited about the pass catching options there, so I would probably sit every other Patriot. But Douglas is involved enough, good enough that you can play him. And then for the Giants, it's Saquon and nobody else. It's probably going to be how it is the rest of the season. Darius Slayton showed that he's probably the wide receiver 1 on this team last week, but then he got banged up. He might be able to suit up in week 12, but even with that, I don't think I'd be confident at all in him. So it's Saquon and nobody else for the Giants this week, and honestly, the rest of the way. Then we got the Steelers at the Bengals. For the Steelers, Deontay Johnson, he's a low-end wide receiver 3. I know it's been really rough the last couple of weeks, but he still got that target share going for him. They fired their offensive coordinator. This Bengals pass defense isn't fantastic. So I think Deontay's a guy that you can play, especially in PPR formats. Just obviously, I wouldn't expect the ceiling game out of him. I think the Steelers probably end up winning this game pretty easily, probably winning it, playing the Steeler way where they just play defense and run the ball. So not going to be a ton of volume for the Steelers this week, I don't think, but Deontay's a guy that's involved enough in the offense that you can play him. Outside of that, Najee and Warren, they're both startable, like low-end running back 2 options. Warren is probably the better choice between the two if you have both, but Najee is probably more likely to score. Warren's the more explosive player. We know how it is at this point with them. They're both the low-end options. You're hoping for either a big play out of Warren or a touchdown out of Najee, but I think they both project to do pretty well this week. The Bengals are probably not going to be very competitive. Najee and the Steelers probably be able to run the ball quite a bit. So I think they both end up with like 15 plus touches, and you can start both of them probably. Outside of that, for the Steelers, George Pickens and Pat Freiermuth, they're going to be on my benches. Not confident at all in George Pickens right now. I need to see him be more involved in the offense. And then Pat Freiermuth, he's a guy that I still think can be rostered in fantasy. We've seen him be a high-end fantasy producer before, but coming off that injury, he only had one target last week. He's not someone that I'm looking to start until I see that usage pick up. And then for the Bengals, Joe Mixon and Jamar Chase are the only Bengals that really should be in lineup. So Joe Burrow out, T. Higgins out this week. The only regulars in this lineup are Mixon and Chase. Both obviously get downgrades with how poorly this offense projects to do, especially against a really good Steelers defense. So I don't love that. I'm not going to get cute with a guy like Tyler Boyd this week against a really tough matchup. So it's going to be Mixon and Chase and nobody else for me for the Bengals. Next, we got the Panthers and the Titans. This one is just pretty easy for me, honestly. It's Thielen and nobody else. The Panthers, the Titans have an elite run defense, so I wouldn't consider playing either Panthers running back. There's no other receiver that's really evolved at all in this offense for Carolina. So that and Thielen and nobody else there. And then for the Titans, it's probably Derrick Henry and nobody else. This is the game the Titans will probably win relatively easy. Derrick Henry is going to have 25, 30 touches, to be completely honest. Going to be a game mostly on the running game. Probably get a defensive couple turnovers out of Bryce Young. Going to be easy for the Titans to win this game. I don't expect it to be super competitive. And then that makes me worried about playing the guys like DeAndre Hopkins. So you obviously can play him, but you're just hoping for a big play, sort of like last week. They had the one trick play for a 40-yard touchdown to Hopkins. Outside of that, he had like 3 for 13. Not a very high floor for DeAndre Hopkins. He could easily goose you in this one. So I'd prefer to bench DeAndre Hopkins if I can. But if you need to play him, I guess it's like a low-end wide receiver 3 or 4 right now. Next, we got a really fun game from the Jaguars and the Texans. Super excited for this one. It could low-key be a game that decides who ends up winning the division. For the Jaguars, Travis Etienne, Calvin Ridley, Christian Kirk, and Evan Ingram. I think they're all probably in your lineups. Etienne's obviously like a low-end running back 1. We've seen a little bit of regression out of him. The touchdowns just haven't really swung his way lately. They've been more towards Lawrence, but they was sort of swinging too heavily in his favor early on in the season. I think he's still a low-end running back 1. He's got that workhorse volume. Etienne's obviously in your lineups. Ridley and Kirk, they both are guys that can be in your lineups for sure. The Texans do give it up to opposing receivers. Don't think Zay Jones really factors into the conversation here much. I think Ridley and Kirk are both really solid starts. And then Evan Ingram, probably in your lineups. He's a usable tight end, has yet to score a touchdown this season. That's really just been what's held him back. But he's getting the volume. He could easily score this week. Ingram's definitely in your lineups for sure. Outside of that, Trevor Lawrence, he's a solid quarterback streaming option. Not expecting like those high-end numbers like we got last week, but he's at this point he belongs in that quarterback streaming like range of quarterbacks that like generally rank between like 10 and 15 on the week. And this is the plus matchup for him. So if you want to stream Lawrence this week, you could definitely do worse. For the Texans, TJ Stroud, he's a low-end quarterback 1. Really like the matchup for him. The Jaguars are a really great run defense. They're probably going to have to throw the ball in Houston, and I think that'll be pretty easy for CJ Stroud to do. There's no way I'm benching Tank Dell or Nico Collins. It sounds like Noah Brown's not going to suit up in this one. Makes it more concentrated in this receiving room. So both Dell and Nico are going to be in your lineups for sure. Dalton Schultz is a solid play at the tight end position. He's involved in a good offense. You can't really ask for much more than that out of your tight end. And then for the running backs in Houston, I'm concerned about Devin Singletary, even if Dameon Pierce sits. I actually sort of think Dameon Pierce is going to suit up in this game, but even if he's out, it's a really tough matchup against the Jaguars. Their run defense is actually relatively great. And on top of that, I just don't think this is going to be a game that the Texans like get up and get to lean on their run game in. So if Dameon Pierce sits, I think you can play Singletary as like a low-end running back 2, but I wouldn't expect like a high-end production level out of him like you got the last couple of weeks. Probably just going to be a flash in the pan here. I do still think that Singletary ends up getting like, 50 to 60% of the work with Dameon Pierce back, but he'll probably lose out on goal line work. And then obviously Dameon Pierce has shown that he can be a talented running back. It's possible that Dameon Pierce can steal that role. So I'd be super concerned about playing Singletary if Dameon Pierce plays. And if he sits, just understand that I don't believe there's a super high ceiling for him this week. Next, we got the Saints at the Falcons. The Saints, Chris Olave and Alvin Kamara, they're going to be must starts. Obviously, Chris Olave gets a bit of a bump if Jameis Winston starts. We saw how much Jameis Winston looked for Chris Olave last week when he came into the game. And Alvin Kamara gets a bump if it ends up being Derek Carr. I mentioned both quarterbacks because Derek Carr still has not cleared concussion protocol as of when I'm recording this, which is at about like 9 p.m. Pacific time Friday night. So it's possible that you guys have an update by the time you're watching this, but just keep that in mind. Either way, they're both must starts, but I'm super excited about Olave if it ends up being Winston again, although I would lean towards it being Carr right now. Rashid Shaheed is a solid flex option, especially with Michael Thomas being placed on IR. He is their wide receiver 2 right now. And especially if you need an upside play, Shaheed's obviously got a shot to go for like 3 catches for 120 yards and a touchdown any given week. Could easily be his stat line. I really like Shaheed as a player, and he's a guy that I'm happy getting into my lineup, especially if you need some upside on your roster. And again, if Jameis Winston ends up being in a quarterback, Shaheed also gets a bump there. Taysom Hill, he's probably going to be in your lineups. He's a pseudo tight end basically for them. He's a guy that plays all over the field. If we end up seeing Derek Carr miss this game, I bet you see Taysom Hill in at quarterback a little bit more as well. He'd get quite a bit of work, and he's just a guy that they manufacture touches for, always a threat to score, and being able to play him at the tight end position is a bit of a cheat code. So I'd play Taysom Hill if you have him. And I think you can stream the Saints quarterback, whoever it ends up being, if it's Derek Carr or Jameis Winston. They both are probably going to have a relatively high end game here. It's tough to run on the Atlanta Falcons, but you can really throw against them. I think either Saints quarterback would have a relatively decent fantasy game this week, so they'd be like a low end streaming option for me. For the Falcons, Bijan Robinson, he's a must start for them. He's finally getting that workhorse role work. We only saw it like once this last week, but I think it's going to be there for him. He's just a guy, he's too talented to keep on benches for sure. Drake London, he's a low end wide receiver 3. Obviously, hasn't been the season you want out of him so far, and the Saints defense isn't bad, but he's a guy that's obviously the alpha in this offense, and he's a guy that, I think that you can play as like a low end wide receiver 3 or flex play. Outside of that, for Atlanta, Jonnu Smith and Kyle Pitts, they're low end tight end options. I think I'd prefer to look elsewhere. I just don't think this is going to be a super high end passing performance from the Atlanta Falcons, and I have a tough time being able to honestly tell you which tight end's going to have the big game. So it makes it tough for me to really recommend either one of them. But I get it if you need to start one of them. I just don't expect a super big game out of either one. Next, we got the Rams at the Cardinals. For the Rams, Kyren, Kupp, and Puka are all going to be must starts for me. We saw Kyren and Kupp combined for over 300 yards last time these two teams met. Puka had a chance to score against them as well. Puka is definitely in your lineups. Kyren, I understand, is a little bit scary for some people. People are concerned that we could see a similar to a Devon Achane situation where he comes in and re-injures himself. He's had 5 weeks to recover from a high ankle sprain. That is generally when we see players return to 100%. So I'm not really worried about Kyren at this point. He's a guy that I'm super comfortable starting in. I really do think he's going to be a really great option for you guys. Remember, he had over 150 rushing yards against the Cardinals last time he played. For Stafford, I think you can stream him, but I'd be a little bit scared about it. My concern would be the Rams could just get up early in this game. I don't think the Cardinals are a very elite team by any means, especially on defense. I could see the Rams just trying to establish the run, and they should have a lot of success doing that. They had a lot of success doing it last time these two teams met. So there's a little bit of downside there with Stafford, and obviously there's injury risk associated with both him and Cooper Kupp right now. So you can stream him if you want to, but I'd be a little bit worried. I'd probably look elsewhere. For the Cardinals, Kyler Murray, he's a top 10 quarterback, probably going to be that the rest of the season. He's offering enough on the ground, looks good enough, and should only improve as he shakes that rust off. So I'm probably playing Kyler Murray if I have him. James Conner, he's a solid running back 2 play. The volume's there for him. He just hasn't really been involved in the passing game quite as much as we want. He also hasn't found the end zone since he's come back, but it could certainly happen at some point here. I think he probably has a good shot to score this week. I'm playing James Conner in the 2 leagues that I have him. Marquise Brown, he's a scary wide receiver 3 play. Obviously, just hasn't really connected with Kyler Murray just yet, but he's been in each of throose games like a bit of an overthrow away from scoring on a big touchdown. That could easily happen this week. The Rams' pass defense isn't one that scares me. So you can play Marquise Brown, but obviously just understand there's a super low floor for him. And then Trey McBride, you're starting him. He's probably a top 5 tight end this week. He's someone that's got to be in your lineup. He doesn't lead the field, and this Rams' pass defense is not great, especially against tight ends. Next, we got the Browns at the Broncos. This is likely going to be a low-scoring affair. Both defenses have been playing really well. Both offenses have been mediocre at best. So both defenses can be started for sure. I just want to mention that. Outside of that, for the Browns, Jerome Ford, he's a low-end running back 2. His usage was a little bit confusing last week. We saw the Browns drop back to pass with DTR 46 times last week. I don't know if that's something they'll continue to do. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me that they would do that. But if they do, Jerome Ford is obviously still usable because he's used near the goal line. He's a guy that you can play. I just don't expect a ceiling game out of him. And then Amari Cooper, he's a low-end flex play for me. Obviously, you're hoping that he can connect on a deep shot with DTR, but DTR really didn't impress me at all last week. I know they won, but it really wasn't because of DTR. He couldn't throw the ball down the field, and that's where Amari Cooper excels. So I'd prefer to be benching Amari Cooper, but I understand if you need to play him, he's just obviously not a great option this week. And then David Njoku, he's a great option for me at the tight end position. Had 15 targets last week. That was a career high for him. He's a good player. They can do a lot with him when he gets the ball in open space. I think it makes a lot of sense for them to really hyper target him, basically use him as like an extension of the run game. I see him being super involved with the Browns going forward. He's someone that I'd probably be starting for sure. For the Broncos, Russ, he should probably be on benches. I know he's been in streaming consideration and like plus matchups for them, but this is not a matchup that I'd expect a ton of points being scored by either team. I do think the Broncos win this game, but it'll probably be like a 20-14 kind of win. Nothing super exciting. You're betting that Russ scores a couple touchdowns if you play him, and it's just not something that I see a ceiling for. So I'd be benching Russ if I can. Javonte Williams is a low-end running back too. Obviously, the volume was a little bit concerning last week. It sort of looked like he was turning that corner, hovering around 30 touches per game for the 2 weeks in a row. And then last week, he had 13 touches, I believe. So Obviously, a little bit concerning there, but they're using 3 running backs, so it just makes it a little bit concerning. But he's obviously the guy that would get the ball at the goal line. He's involved enough that you can play him. Just again, I wouldn't expect a ceiling performance for him. And then the only other Bronco that I'd even consider playing is going to be Cortland Sutton. He'd be a touchdown dependent wide receiver 3. Good news is Denzel Ward is out for Cleveland, their best cornerback. So I bet Sutton actually ends up finding the end zone again. He continues to do it. He scored a touchdown in all but 2 games so far this season. A guy that's honestly just their go-to guy when they get down towards the red zone. Really good player. He's playing really well, and he's got a really good connection with Russ. So I think I will be playing Sutton in a couple of weeks. I have him. Just understand that it is risky. You do need him to find the end zone for that to pay off. So there's obviously a really low floor for that, him and anybody in this Broncos offense, or really anybody in this game, because of how low scoring it could be. Next, we got the Bills at the Eagles. Obviously, we're hoping for a shootout in this game, sort of like we were hoping for between the Eagles and the Chiefs. A little bit of concern here is that there is a bit of a chance of rain for this game. So it's a sort of situation where we could see sort of like a bit of a repeat between this Eagles and Chiefs game this last week, where it was sort of raining. Neither team really got things going. So I think there's sort of the chance here that we end up being a little bit disappointed with this game, but I do think we could see a lot of points scored as well. So I'm pretty excited for this game. Should be a lot of fun. Josh Allen, Diggs, and Dalton Kincaid, they're all going to be must starts for the Bills, guys that are just super involved in the offense. Obviously, elite players is definitely going to be in your lineups, especially in a plus matchup for the pass catchers in Buffalo. James Cook, he's a low-end running back too. You're obviously going to need passing game involvement because I just don't see a world where he scores. He's not being utilized inside the red zone very much. He did catch a pass and score last week, but Eagles are an elite run defense. He's not going to have very good efficiency in all likelihood. He's probably not going to get touches inside the red zone. So there's obviously a low floor here for James Cook. I don't love his outlook, but I get it if you need to play him. And then Gabe Davis and Khalil Shakir, they're both low-end flex options for me. I do sort of feel like this is going to be a big Gabe Davis week. So I get it if you want to play him, but I will also hedge that by saying that I have him in 3 of 7 leagues and I'm benching him in all of them. So even though I sort of feel like I'm going to be wrong there by benching him, I think he could have a big game, but it's just so tough for me to predict that. He's gotten like nothing going the last couple of weeks, but this Eagles pass defense is not great. They'll probably focus on Stephon Diggs, and Dalton Kincaid's going to have a good game. So I think Gabe Davis could easily connect on a deep shot, and that could easily happen, but I just don't know if I have the stones to play him. But I just do want to bring that up, that I sort of do think this is going to be a big Gabe Davis week. And there's really no questions for the Eagles. You're starting Jalen Hurts, DeAndre Swift, AJ Brown, and Devonta Smith. Easy must starts. Don't even need to think about it. And Dallas Goedert's going to be out again this week, so nothing to think about the tight end position there. Next, we've got the Chiefs at the Raiders. The Chiefs, Mahomes, Kelsey, and Pacheco do need to be in lineups. I do want to mention that I suppose there's a circumstance where you could have benched Mahomes this week. I have seen a couple of leagues where people have him and Dak, and I would have played Dak over him on Thursday. There are some streaming options that I could consider looking at, but in general, you're just starting Mahomes. I know it hasn't been great, and there is obviously a concern here that the Chiefs could win relatively easily. Lean on the run game. It sounds like Max Crosby's not even going to suit up for the Raiders. The Raiders defense isn't going to be great. The Raiders will be trailing most of the game. The Chiefs defense will hold up, and it's probably just not going to be great by any means for the Raiders this week. But I still think you obviously got to play Mahomes. And then Pacheco, like I said, he's definitely going to be a must start because they should be able to lean on that run game this week. And honestly, I wouldn't start anybody else for the Chiefs. None of the pass catchers really separated themselves. Justin Watson led the team in targets last week. It's just not something that I can really honestly predict for you guys. So I would just recommend benching every single Chiefs wide receiver outside of that. For the Raiders, Jacobs and Devontae Adams, they're likely must starts. I do want to bring up that Devontae Adams may have a really tough game this week. L'Jarius Sneed's playing really well. He's been shadowing the number 1 wide receiver on the other team every single week, and he's done a really good job of that. The only wide receiver that's really put up a good game against him is Joshua Palmer this year, but he shut down some really elite wide receivers so far this season. Did it again last week against AJ Brown. He only gave it 1 catch for 8 yards. So keep that in mind, but I think you need to pretty much be loaded at the wide receiver position to consider benching Adams, but I just don't think this is going to be a ceiling week for Adams. So I get it if you want to look elsewhere. You just have to be in a really good spot to even consider it. And Jacoby Myers and Michael Mayer, they need to be on benches or even waivers. They're just not going to be really useful in the Aidan O'Connell-led Raiders team right now. Next, we got the Sunday night game between the Ravens and the Chargers. Lamar and Gus Edwards, they're going to be must starts for me. I think this Chargers run defense has just been absolutely brutal. I bet Gus Edwards finds the end zone again. And then Lamar, in any matchup you're playing him, I know that even without Mark Andrews, he's obviously got a little bit of a lower ceiling, but he showed that he can get it done last week. We've seen him do it without Mark Andrews before. So I'm starting Lamar for sure. I want to start Zay Flowers, but stay tuned on his health. Obviously, he popped up in the injury report this week, missed practice, but I believe was a hip injury. I still think he's going to play, and I'm comfortable playing him in that matchup because he's pretty much going to be the wide receiver 1, their primary target in the offense with Mark Andrews out. So I do want to start him, especially in a plus matchup against the Chargers, but keep an eye on that. If he ends up coming out with a report that maybe he'll be limited, we just want to be aware of that and make sure we don't miss anything here. So outside of that, OBJ, he's a low end flex option. Obviously, not someone that I'm super excited about, but he did have over 100 yards last week. He's been a little bit more involved in the offense. Scored a touchdown in a couple weeks in a row prior to that as well. So he's a low end flex option for me. And also, I want to note that if, say, Flowers ends up coming out with a report that he's either going to be limited or miss this game, I would feel pretty confident starting OBJ if, say, Flowers are going to be limited or miss. Keaton Mitchell, he's a desperation play at the running back position. I know we sort of saw him take away snaps from Justice Hill this last week, and that does make him a little bit more enticing, but it's just so tough for me to recommend him. He's probably going to have less than 10 touches. You're betting on an explosive run or an explosive screen pass or something, and that could happen. So he's obviously got a high ceiling, but the floor is 0 points for Keaton Mitchell. So just understand that if you're playing him, you've got a really wide range of outcomes there. So he's sort of like a Gabe Davis level play at the running back position, just not someone that I'm confident in. Then Isaiah Likely, he's a low end, risky tight end one option. There's a really wide range of outcomes for him as well. We could see him just fill right into that Mark Andrews role and be an elite tight end option, or we could easily see him be the one catch for 4 yards like Isaiah Likely that we got in week 1 when Mark Andrews missed. So just keep that in mind. I think you can play Likely, and if you need the tight end position if you were desperate at the tight end, maybe you had to pick him up on waivers. I get why you're playing him, but just not super excited about his prospects this week. And then for the Chargers, I think it's really easy. It's Herbert, Eckler, and Keenan. They're going to be in your lineups for sure, and then nobody else. I'm not going to get cute with a guy like Jaden Guyton, not Quentin Johnston. The Ravens defense is too good for us to look at any of those ancillary pieces here. And last, we got the Monday night game between the Bears and Vikings. For the Bears, Justin Fields is a low-end quarterback one. Obviously offers a ton of rushing ability. He led the NFL with 18 rushing attempts last week at the quarterback position. That's a season high for any quarterback. He's a guy that's obviously being scripted touches, and the Bears want to see what they have in him. He's looked good, at least from a fantasy standpoint. So I'm playing Justin Fields this week probably. Outside of that, Khalil Herbert and Roschon Johnson, they're both desperation plays at the running back position. I'd prefer to sit both of them. I just can't confidently tell you which one's going to have a good game, if any one. Neither one has looked fantastic by any means. This Vikings run defense was able to keep the Broncos in check last week. So I'm skeptical about playing either one of them. I prefer to keep them both on my bench, but you can play them if you need to. DJ Moore, he's a wide receiver 3 option. You need that big play to connect for him to end up being a high-end performer, but with Justin Fields, that big play is a little bit more likely. You can play him. Just understand that, again, there's a really wide range of outcomes for DJ Moore. Cole Kmet, he's a low-end tight end 1. Obviously, he's kind of a guy that you need to score, but there are a lot of tight ends that need to score to be usable for fantasy, and Cole Kmet's been scoring quite a bit as far as tight ends go. So if you want to play Cole Kmet, I have no problem with that. I think he's probably going to have a relatively okay game this week. For the Vikings, Joshua Dobbs, he's a streaming option, someone that I'm not super excited about. I would prefer to play a guy like Justin Fields if I have them both, but he's a guy that obviously the Bears defense is not fantastic. Dobbs is offering quite a bit on the ground. I think you could do a lot worse than Joshua Dobbs, so he can certainly be in your lineup. For the running backs, Madison and Chandler are both low-end running back options. I would prefer to play either Viking running back over either Bears running back, but again, really just similar situation here. Sort of similar to the Steelers, you've got Madison and Chandler basically being Najee and Warren in this situation. Madison's sort of the plotter that you're hoping falls in the end zone. Chandler's the more explosive player, guy that could probably be more involved as a pass catcher. There is some concern with Madison that we know he did fumble again last week. That's been a problem for him this season. We could see a situation where Chandler gets more involved in the offense because they just don't trust Madison anymore. I don't necessarily think that's going to happen, but there's just, for both these guys, the floor literally is 0 points or near it. So again, wide range of outcomes for these guys, not enough ceiling for me to really trust playing them, but I think you can play them. You're just hoping that things break right for either one. For the pass catchers, Justin Jefferson, he's a must start if he's active. I still don't think he's going to suit up this week. It just makes too much sense for them to give him the bye and then bring him back in week 14. But if he plays, there's no way I'm sitting Justin Jefferson. Jordan Addison, he's a wide receiver 3 if Justin Jefferson sits, and he'd be a flex option if Jefferson is active. So I think you can play him either way, but I'd probably be looking to find a better option if Jefferson plays. Otherwise, I'm happy to start Jordan Addison if Jefferson sits. And then TJ Hawkinson, he's a must start. There's no way I'm sitting him. He's going to be a top 3 tight end pretty much every week going forward, at least in terms of my projections. So Hawkinson, there's no way I'm sitting him. So that'll do it for the Week 12 start and sit video. Up next Sunday morning, you guys will get the live streams 1 hour before kickoff, so 9 a.m. Pacific time, 12 p.m. Eastern time. I'll go through all the latest injury updates, help you guys get all your last-second start-sit questions answered, and hopefully get you guys all squared up to win some matchups. As always, if you guys have any specific start-sit questions as well, you're more than welcome to ask me in the comments of this video. I'll be happy to get back to you. I do want to mention that, again, tomorrow I'll be driving back home from the families for the holidays, so I'll be in the car for about 8 hours. So if you do make a comment, I'll either be having to respond to it while I'm pumping gas, or I'll respond to it when I get home tomorrow night. So don't panic if I don't get back to you guys right away, but I will promise to get back to you guys all before the end of the night if you guys leave a comment. And then If you guys want to make sure you do get access to the Sunday morning live stream, just make sure you subscribe to the channel. We're at about 960 right now, so need 40 more to hit that goal of 1,000. Would love to hit that goal. It'd be super just exciting for me to have hit that goal that I've had for so long. And then also it'll help make sure that you guys don't miss any of the live streams or anything, can help me help you going forward. So we've got this week and then 5 more before the end of the actual fantasy football season. Just 2 more weeks after this one before we get into the fantasy playoffs. We've got a lot of things still left to get decided, and obviously a lot of glory left to get had. So really appreciate you guys taking the time to watch these videos. Hopefully you guys are all safe and everything and had a good holiday weekend and all that. And hopefully we can get you guys some wins to close out the holidays. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Peace.